It's hard to do this because after 400 years, it would take us all day or night. But Lancaster is indeed a beautiful place. And I want to say that this is one of the most beautiful statements that somebody made about the place. Lancaster is a wondrous charm about the old town. You know, she just was touring through in 1905. Whether seen from a drive through the wooded uplands and dells at the northern extremity, or Ponican Hill or Wachusett, it's beautiful Lancaster, beautiful always. And I always remember that. Okay, so I'll move forward. Next. Oh, shish kebab. The trees alone are worth a trip. Okay, there is our famous tree that blew down back in 1907, the Lancaster elm. It was worth a trip out of town to see it. Lancaster, plantation of the Nashua. Not the same kind of start as you would have in a regular town where you would just settle your minister and start a place for people to live. It was an industrial experiment. They were looking for iron ore. They weren't necessarily trying to develop a town per se. And it was a large parcel, as you can see there, Lancaster, and then down below you kind of see the meeting of the waters there toward Clinton, where the Nashua North Branch on the left and the Pennacook River on the right-hand side come together right in Lancaster. That makes the land with the river so close with all of our intervales attractive because you can grow crops. Okay, story of the founder, John Prescott. We all know him. He was a man outstanding above the others. He stayed on even though the original incorporators drifted away. For various reasons, he endured and built the town. And if you've ever driven through Clinton, this was the site of one of his homes and his mill on Water Street. He was such an industrious man that they recognized his talent and gave him extra land over in Clinton. And he started first the Prescott Grist Mill, the first industry in Worcester County, and then later a sawmill. And if you look down on the side of the road when you pass by, there's remnants of the place where the pond was for the mill, Prescott Mills. And if you're up near the post office in Clinton, they have a marker there. It's small, looking down over the post office parking lot on the left-hand side, but it says, near this spot stood the house built by John Prescott, 1654, burned by the Indians in 1676. And I never even knew that spot was there until someone showed me a couple years ago. Okay, so it was a long time. If you look at that finely tuned stone in the back, that's one of the first memorials put up for Mr. Prescott about, I think, 1925, but his little unassuming kind of marker is right in front of it, kind of just a little stick in the ground, a granite post in the ground. It was not named for him because he was not a freeman. He wasn't a member of the church. The people who came to Massachusetts, if you were not a Puritan, you were considered outcast, sort of. And he had not joined the church, and so the town was not named for him, but rather Lancashire is where he came from in England. And there are some reminders in Lancaster, South Lancaster on the corner of George Hill Road and the main street. There's a stone there, it still has the marker on it, and also Prescott Street in South Lancaster. And of course, more recently, the school on the town green has been renamed the Prescott Building. And his people, the Prescott name scattered abroad, and on the left-hand side you see Colonel William Prescott, who was a great-grandson. He's famous for having said, or we think he said, we're not sure who said it, "Don't fire till you see the whites of their eyes." Okay, at Bunker Hill. And on the right-hand side there's another, he's a grandson of Colonel William Prescott, William Hickling. He's kind of blind there. He had very poor eyesight in his lifetime. He was famous for being a scholar. He wrote about the Spanish monarchs and the conquests of Mexico and Peru. He lived in Boston. I think the colonial dames have his house there on Beacon Hill now. And Prescott, Arizona is named for William Hickling Prescott. So they went beyond our borders. Then we have Mary Rawlinson. Lancaster's famous for her. And we all know her story, her narrative. And there is a picture of the White family. She was originally born in England, but the family originally settled on the North Shore in Wenham, Massachusetts, and later moved to Lancaster with her father, and shortly thereafter married the Reverend Rowlandson. When we did start the town, around 1653, 1656, they married. The white relatives always came back. This house is on Neck Road, still standing, a house of one of her relatives. And then, of course, there was King Philip's War. She was a very highly prized captive because she was the wife of the minister. So she had high value as a trade. Yes. And then we have here Rawlinson Rock, the first night when the house was attacked, and her garrison house was the least fortified. So the Indians did come with a cart, and it was burning with hemp or flax, pushed into the house, and the people had a choice. You either stay inside and burn to death, or you'd come out and get bludgeoned or taken captive. And of course, she was dragged up Rawlinson Rock Hill, George Hill, and there was a sign there on the main road in Lancaster pointing to it there. And then she was captive for about 2.5 months. She trekked through the wilderness. She had 3 children. 2 of the older ones were taken captive to different places. Her youngest daughter, who had been shot, she took with her as far as Winnamesset, which is out in New Braintree, Massachusetts, and there's a marker out there that shows the approximate location of Sarah, her little girl's grave. And she has a very moving passage in her writing about having to say goodbye to that little girl and leaving her body in the wilderness. And then our Henry Stedman nurse, who is a big Lancaster historian, did a map, and that shows all of her removes over those many days of the 2.5 months. Very, very accurate map. And then finally the redemption, May 2nd at Redemption Rock in Princeton. And King Philip was present, but he didn't give his consent. And she was given back. And then they went to Wethersfield, Connecticut. When Lancaster was resettled, the Rawlinsons did not go there. They went instead to Wethersfield, and her husband, the Reverend Rawlinson, died a couple years later. Mary was lost to history, so to speak. But anyway.
And you found her in the court records.
Yeah, I'm getting to that. Okay. Yep, I'm getting to that. Okay, so this is the graveyard, and it's on a hill. And if you're a more important person, you're buried up toward the top of the hill, and you might have a tabletop grave. No tabletop grave for Mary. Couldn't find her grave anywhere. The closest grave that we could find was the William Rowlandson, who died on 1735. And that's exactly the way it is on the stone. Hard to read because the stone down there is sandstone. It wears away very quickly. Not like slate. I love slate. Okay, and here's another gathering at the garrison site, 1898. And the marker along the main street, which many people have been able to see. It's privately owned, that land, and you're not really supposed to go onto the land. The owners don't really appreciate having people tramp through. Okay, and then Rawlinson Rock, the triangular parcel, was in the possession of the Kilbourne, old Lancaster family for many years. The trustees of reservations did not want the land. They said it's too small. It's about a portion of an acre, less than an acre. But this is where she spent her night of captivity. And we later, from the Historical Society and Commission, were able to get a better looking sign on the side there that commemorates the spot. And there is Bill Kilbourne, the man who owned the land technically before it was given over to Lancaster's Conservation Commission. And we had a little ceremony there, and Bill had passed away, but his brother Dave, who's in that picture, and he's since passed, but he was there at the ceremony for the Rawlinson Rock. Mary Rowlandson Elementary School. Of course, we named a school for her, so that's the beautiful thing about Mary Rowlandson, our second person. Prescott and Rawlinson. Okay, here's a picture of our beautiful town green as it looked back in 1856. You could see the configuration of the buildings is quite different. The Bullfinch Church, of course, is there. The town hall right in front of the church, gone. And also that little school on the left, the white building, is a schoolhouse. Okay, it was a scene of a beautiful pageant in 1912. The Thayer family had staged it. I'm sure they were the ones in back of setting it all up. It was very elaborate. They had English feet, okay, with a maypole. Yeah, and these are only a few of them. Settlement, they reenacted. This had to be a multi-day preparation. Massacre by the Indians. Mary Rawlinson taken captive and got this life-size doll in her arms there. Looks like there's two. I don't know how that goes, but there's an Indian right in back over there. And the departure of the Minutemen in the Revolutionary War time, 1775. See how sad the women all look as the men march away. And the reception for Lafayette in 1824. And that was a big deal when he came back to America. Most of the early patriots were dead by that time, but he came back to pay his respects to the country. And he came to Lancaster, and there was this beautiful archway there on the green. And of course, 200 years after that, he came back again. That's not the real guy. This picture was taken, but isn't he nice? I mean, yeah. I love the way he's dressed, and I love the pose. That picture was taken down in Virginia a few months ago. I went down there because I'm a Lafayette fan. Anyway, so Lafayette did make a return. Not many of the others did. Okay, dancing the minuet. The pageant actors, you can see the church and the Welcome Lafayette and the beautiful audience there. It attracted thousands of people on that weekend, July 4th or whenever it was back in 1912. So, and it was nice because the town green had been enlarged to accommodate a stage setting. It was like a grand outdoor theater stage. Our next most famous, Lancaster is the birthplace of Luther Burbank. People say, who? Who? They don't know who Luther Burbank is anymore. I think I read the book on the right-hand side, maybe at the Lancaster Library when I was a kid. Anyway, here he is about 17 years old, born in Lancaster. On the Devens property, this house was used probably for target practice back when Devens was taken over by the Army. They took it over and used it for the South Post. Okay, and that's a school where he probably attended classes, demolished in the late 30s. And here is a very nice attempt to commemorate his memory. And if you're old enough, you might know the lady who's on the in the picture on the left-hand side. Her name was Esther MacDonald. Esther MacDonald was a town clerk, and she made a move to have the Shasta daisy made the country's national flower. And she partnered with people at Devens. She partnered with people in California and Santa Clara. And here it is up at Devens. They had 1959. There's the officials, and she's standing there with the Shasta daisies. And there's this beautiful marker that says, this is the birthplace site of the house. And you can see, I think on the right-hand side, there's even a picnic table. If you could go up and want to sit there and enjoy the site. Back in the day, that's what it looks like now, if it's even that good. Okay, so this is how it looks. I think Michael Sarrazin and I, the former president of the Lancaster Historical Society, we went up there. We had a tour. You can't go in there. It's no trespassing unless you have an escorted tour. So this is what it looks like now. Pretty sad, huh? Can't go there, but we have a memory. Okay, and there's a marker on the town green as well, if you happen to notice it. And then Luther Burbank Middle School, which is a nice remembrance of him. Now, Henry Ford, who is a contemporary of Luther Burbank's, did take a portion of that house, not the brick portion, but the portion that was in the right-hand side on the former picture. And he brought it to his Living History Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. And this is supposed to be the L of the house where Luther was born. So Henry brought that out to his museum. And then when Luther's father died, he inherited some money, and he bought himself a farm up in Lunenburg, Massachusetts. And this is where we believe he developed the russet potato, which became the McDonald French fry potato. Okay, so here's his house, and there he is now. He landed in California. The climate was ever so much better for growing things. He was the 13th child of his father's, and some of his brothers had been out there prior to, and they said, oh, Luther, you've got to come out. You can grow things beautifully. So this is where he settled. That's his house. There he is looking at some of his beautiful horticultural attempts. He built a house out there. The first floor was mainly his office space. He met on the front porch there Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, the great people of his age. And back in the 1960s, there's this thing called urban renewal. And urban renewal came to Santa Clara, California. And there was an argument about it at the time, of course, but in the end, those who wanted to demolish the house had their way. And so there's nothing there now. They put up a new city hall. And of course, Luther is big out there. He's much bigger an attraction than he is here in Massachusetts. But they rebuilt a garden and a house, probably, if you visit there, and probably a gift shop. Prescott, Arizona is truly after William Hickling Prescott. I looked up Burbank, California. It's named after a dentist from New Hampshire.
Oh, for goodness sake.
His name was David Burbank. They might have been distant cousins. And I said, nope, not the same. Okay, so anyway, that's where the front door of the house used to be. So that's urban renewal, Santa Clara style. And the man who wrote the article in 2024 was very sarcastic about it. He said, oh, this is so Santa Clara. There he is, a spry old gentleman, wasn't he? And there he is, famous for, he's had several things written about him, a series of books, mucho books, and his potato, the russet potato, and the Shasta daisy. He'll be known for that and ever so much more. Story of the Lancaster Thayers, and I've done this many times before, so we'll zip through quickly. There they are, 4 generations, coming with a reverend in about 1793 as the pastor of the First Church of Christ. Was built during his tenure. And then he had a son, actually 2 sons, who walked to Boston and made a fortune. Nathaniel Thayer II is the one who made the best amount of money. And then the next generation down inherited the money and were also businessmen in their own right. And then the last one is on the very bottom, E.V.R. Thayer II, and he has the only other mansion in town. They had a lot of girls in the family, a lot of daughters, and the daughters married and they moved away. Okay, so here's the parsonage for the Reverend, and he later had the parsonage taken down, and he wanted this as a Victorian villa for his wife, I believe, who was a Van Rensselaer from New York. And the Reverend Thayer's wife, she lived for several years after the Reverend died. The Reverend Thayer died in 1840. His widow didn't die until 1857. And I don't think the son would have taken down the house while the mother was still living there.
Sarah
the old
Topin, I think her name.
Toppin, yeah, Sarah Toppin Thayer. Yeah, so he waited until she passed 1857 and then built this new place. And then, of course, in 1903-04, a very famous architect, designer in Boston and beyond, Ogden Codman, enlarged it. And it says Ogden Codman on steroids. You can see the big wings on either side, and from the back it looks magnificent. And it was quite a beautiful place. And now it's sitting empty and unused. Okay, Fair Lawn across the street for E.V.R. Thayer, another one of the brothers in the 3rd generation. 1886, their country home. And this is the slice. This was taken off that main house that we just saw in the 1920s. And it sits there still. The outside has been, the inside of the house, this one has been gutted. So it's completely, it used to be used for student housing for Atlantic Union College. And then, of course, Herbert Hosmer's house in the back there. We'll get to him as well. Yeah, okay. The White House. This is how the White House looks today. And I think these people, privately owned, have done a really good job on this part that they live in. And they've spent a lot of money on upgrading that. I wish they could do the same for the Slice. Down the street, we're going down the street up toward the center of town. It's an old postcard. And this is the Red House, no longer there. This was built probably for the 3rd generation Nathaniel Thayer III. He didn't live there long because he later inherited the homestead house that we had just looked at. And it was taken down probably in the Depression times because it was too much to keep up, because the money had changed by that time. You know, Depression times were hard for everyone. So it's gone now, and this is what sits there in its place. They leveled the ground, and they put in the Atlantic Union College administrative offices. And up on George Hill, this is the John Eliot Thayer house. He was an ornithologist, and we know this commonly as the Bird Museum. We wish we could get this for the Historical Society, but that's up in the air. We have someone who's out trying to, speak in our behalf to get this for us. And oh, wouldn't that be a delight? Okay, this is the other one. This is the Cenacle. And this is the one who has the beautiful gardens in 5 different levels going down, down, down from the main house. And hopefully this is the one that the person wanted to restore that I was speaking of earlier. Wouldn't that be gorgeous? Okay, this is the last of the homes. This one is used as the Trivium School. It's a Catholic prep school up on the back road, Langen Road. And Professor Schmidt, as far as I know, has inherited his father's position and still runs it as a, beautiful prep school up there. And unfortunately, he wanted to put this on the National Register of Historic Places, but he was denied that honor because they had put a gymnasium on one end of it. They needed a gymnasium, and the gymnasium did not look appropriate. And so they said, we're going to deny your request for National Register listing for 50 years. Okay, here's a little map. You can see they pretty much populated the whole of South Lancaster and all the acreage they're involved with. And there's the meeting of the waters there. So nice little map to show you the overview. Okay, we're getting on to the next person here. We've left the Thayers behind. They had a big impact on Lancaster over many generations and years. And now we have pioneer landscape architect born in Lancaster. I recently did a program in more depth on him, Horace William Shaler Cleveland, the man who hated rectangles, and he really did. He didn't like rectangles, he liked curves. This is the house where he was born up on the old common. The house is no longer standing. People were sea captains from Salem who decided to come into the interior, and they lived up there kind of privately to themselves, and they had a society of people who were school teachers, and they had a Latin grammar school up there. And after about 25 years, they left, and this became the headquarters for the Lancaster Industrial School for Girls, the main house was. Okay, now Horace, that man that you just saw as an older guy, had gone to school with his mother at first, and then he was born in 1814, I think it was, and he then went to school on the Lancaster Common in the center, and you could see my little black arrow. One day the kids were out at lunchtime, and they went into the belfry of the church, and I don't know how many of you have heard the story before, but they said, oh my goodness, we think it's time to go back to school. And Horace says, let me look over the edge. He was up there in the belfry, and let me see what time it is. See if it's time to go back. So he leaned over the edge, and lo and behold, he lost his grip on the flagpole, or something gave way. The staple came out or whatever in the flagpole, and he went tumbling. So you could see this little figure tumbling. He dropped 58 feet to the ground. When he hit the ground, he hit a wooden structure that was built around a well. And the well, it bounced him upward. He propelled upward, and it came down again. And he had to have passed out. And he survived. And they brought him, yeah, he survived. Oh yeah, he was an old man in that previous picture. And so they revived him, and he wrote about his experience later. And he said, I didn't really have any memory of it, but this is how people told me it happened. Okay, Cleveland had an idea for developing cemeteries. He wanted to make them more like parks that would be welcoming for families to visit their relatives on an afternoon. Like on a Sunday afternoon, you go and commune with your dead relatives. And this is one that he had input in over in Concord, Massachusetts, Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. He worked with another man, Robert Morris Copeland, developed the landscape plan based on the writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson. And it's a beautiful, beautiful place. I've been there where the Alcotts are buried there. The transcendental people are there. He didn't really come to much of anything on the East Coast because he had competition. Everybody knows the name Frederick Law Olmsted. Olmsted was operating at the same time, became much more famous, even though Horace Cleveland was instrumental in the development of this type of architecture. In as a matter of fact, it says, first attempt, he wrote a book to define and develop a comprehensive scope for the new profession of landscape architecture in its formative period. So mostly he lived in the Midwest. And there's one of his works there. He did some work at a place called Minnehaha Falls in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was made famous by Longfellow's Song of Hiawatha. There's an East Coast project, if you've ever been down to Rhode Island. His name is on that plan for the Roger Williams Park. Beautiful place. In designing Eastwood now, Lancaster, Cleveland emulated the form of a city. When you go there, notice it. A dense, heavily designed center of the 46-acre cemetery was connected by a parkway to a forested area where burials took place here and there among the trees to resemble the rural periphery of a community. So that was all by design. So those people buried in the woods wanted to be back there. And in later years, some of the roads were straightened out, and not the curving roads that he really enjoyed in the beginning, but that was just the way things happened afterwards. Eastwood, you can see how the roads curve out in how many different directions? 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 different directions. And it would give movement from dark to light, views and vistas. If the trees were cut, you could see Mount Monadnock in the distance on the back road, Vista Avenue. And then Cleveland is buried out in Minneapolis, Minnesota, very unassuming kind of a grave. Pioneer, and whose visions reach far beyond his name, lives in the rivers and parks and parkways of the Twin Cities. They are his true monuments. Anyway, the cemetery is now on the National Register for Lancaster, so I'm happy. Recognizing our treasured historical assets. Okay, in case you didn't know, we have been on the job trying to get the things. There's a picture of the Grand Lady of Lancaster history, who I must credit for all the groundwork. If I worked the rest of my life, I could never accomplish what she did in the decades that she worked. She did all the inventory for the houses. She got the commission established. She was a mover and a shaker, and there she is receiving her Lifetime Achievement Award in this Galvin,
Yeah,
and that's Joan
It
Richards.
doesn't look like that anymore.
No.
And that's Deborah Leonard.
Yeah, her office assistant, Deborah Leonard, and her other
That's
office,
Joan Richards.
Joan Richards. And yeah. So these are the things that are on the National Register. First of all, we have churches. We have one church on the register. It's also a landmark, which is a step up from just having it on the register. It's a national landmark. So that's beautiful. Then the Industrial School for Girls. The school started in 1856-ish and closed down in 1973, and Phyllis got it on the register in 1976, which is a little bit late, but there's about 18 buildings on that map. Can't see them very close, but it was a way to bring the girls out from the city and revive their, and nurture them in the ways of right living, because they were a lot of times very disadvantaged girls. The house that was spoken of earlier, this is on the campus of the Industrial School for Girls, and this is how it looked back in the day when Mrs. Pauline Revere Thayer used the Safford House as a vacation home for girls from Boston. Doesn't it look well kept? And on the right-hand side is how it looked last week. And when I was on the commission, we approached Mass Historic several times trying to get them to do something. No. So that's the first one on the hill up the Old Common. And then down below on the left-hand side, there's a picture of the superintendent's house that was used for a superintendent's house called the Abner Pollard House. That's how it looked when it was in better shape. And this is on the right-hand side down below as it looked last week. So it's ready for demolition. All these things are in a national district, but there's no
Way of saving them.
No, not unless the owner comes around and pushes for it. And nobody has pushed hard enough for it. So the campus is divided into 2 parts. On the western side, there's 25 acres that belongs to Perkins RFK School. And Dr. Ames told me that they had it for a 99-year lease, but they renegotiated with the state to get it given to Perkins RFK in perpetuity, the 25 acres to the west. And these 2 houses are on that land. And he said, we can't save them. They're too far gone. So we're going to try to maybe the brick cottages, which were the girls' dormitories, they're going to try to save a couple of those maybe. Okay, another historic district that's on the National Register. There's a map, the North Village. And there is a picture of the sign near the North Village there. It talks about the people who were murdered, the Mordecai MacLeod during King Philip's wartime. And the man who was the mover and shaker in the North Village, so to speak, was Major Jacob Fisher Sr. Okay, so that was the one house that was the Jacob Fisher Sr. Now, he was a cabinet maker. He didn't have a lot of formal education, but he was a genius. He was born in Natick, came to Lancaster through Princeton, married a Lancaster woman. That's what brought him to town, built that beautiful house we just saw the picture of, and then he had 2 sons also. And Jacob Fisher Jr. had a house that's on the left. That one was with asbestos shingles back in 1967, caught fire, burned down. The only thing salvaged was the front door. The front door was considered good enough to take over to the Bolton Historical Society, and it's on their front door of the Bolton Historical Society now. It's in place over there. Okay, and of course, Fisher's Inn went down a few years ago, demolished about 2007. I was told it was going to be re-erected in Ohio, and I don't believe it ever happened. Yeah, okay, here's the Center Village National Historic District. I found a sign. It needs to be painted very badly, but the dark shaping the outline on the right-hand side shows the village, and there's a lot of antique houses in that district. But there's no restrictions on them whatsoever. If the owner decides to, they can pursue getting their individual house on the National Register. This is the Center Village.
Downtown?
Yeah, this is the center of Lancaster. Okay, the central feature of the town green here in the Center Village. Okay, we have all these things that are memorials. We have the Bullfinch Church. We have up in the upper left-hand corner, Civil War Memorial, 1868, the library, Thayer Memorial Library now. The flagpole monument is on the side next to 1918, and years later in 2011, I think, or 2007, they put up the rest of the monuments there for all the other wars except for one war. Anyway, and then we have the Prescott Building, renamed the school, over there on the right-hand side. And then we have the town hall. Now, the Thayer family, when they put up the town hall in honor of their money-making grandfathers, his contribution, his birth date. And so they took down that old town hall that was right in the middle of what's now the green, and they put up the one in the right-hand corner there in direct the line between the altar in the Bullfinch Church and the front steps of the new town hall, 1908 town hall, completely aligned with each other. So it's perfect symmetry, the way they designed it, because that's the way they wanted it. And then, of course, we have, not my favorite thing, but the gazebo, thanks to Netflix. I got overruled on that one. Sorry. Okay, then we have bridges. And I've said, you can't go over this one anymore. Your feet would go right through, I'm sure. That's on Bolton Road. And there, this is on Bolton Road. The Atherton Bridge would be on the right-hand side. And Phyllis Farnsworth, after her husband passed away, I guess he had a brain tumor, something.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, and he passed away, and she got the new bridge, which is much stronger. That's the one you see in the distance there, named after her husband. Very small little sign, you'd miss it. And he was the male partner in the project. And Marion Stoddart, the mother of the Nashua River Greenway plan, or the plan, she was the mother and he was the father of it. So she got the bridge named. And that, I think, was very fitting for him. Yeah, there's the Ponacan Bridge. The factory was on the right-hand side. Down below, that's gone. The bridge was no longer needed because Lunenburg Road was opened. It was a better access way to get up to Route 2. Okay, so cemeteries, and I want you to take this very seriously. Nobody has ever been able to find out where Ben Franklin said this. It's attributed to him. Nobody's been ever be able to find out where he said it, but it's important. Show me your cemeteries and I will tell you what kind of people you have. Okay, here as a collection, I kind of like the artwork in the cemeteries, kind of a hobby of mine. Each one of those tympanums or whatever is from a Lancaster cemetery. They're all different. They represent the works of different carvers. And I think that's artwork, and I think it's beautiful. And most of it's slate, and slate holds up, not like down in Connecticut where it's sandstone. So we have the Old Settlers Cemetery, and that was established, first of all, it says access only with permission, but people go down there anytime they want. Anyway, they totally ignore the rules. Okay, this is the Old Common. When they moved the center of town up toward the Old Common to escape Indian attack, they did that about 1706. And this was right across from the meeting house, the cemetery, the yard. The people who live across the street have a monument for the old meeting house in their front yard. Shaker burial field, you can't get in there without an escort. Right on the Shirley-Lancaster line, the Shakers all had burials in there, and there's that one common monument because they're communal. They don't believe individuals should have any particular special attention. I mean, they used to have some little stones that gave the initials of the people, but they took them out, and now they just have that one common marker. And then we've got the Middle Cemetery, and we've got 37 Revolutionary War soldiers are buried there. So that's kind of important if you're looking for who's buried where. Okay, the North Burial Field, and this has 3 Revolutionary War soldiers. North Village Cemetery, no less than 45 Civil War veterans are buried there. Eastwood, the one I mentioned with Horace Cleveland, that's the one that's still in active use. So that's what we have for our cemetery. Some of them are in better shape than others. I wish we could get them all cleaned up and have money allocated for that purpose. That's a job of a historical commission to go after that money. And I hope whoever is in that place now will do that work. Other listings on the National Register in Lancaster through the years. Anthony Lane House, do you know where that one is? Okay, that's on Seven Bridge Road, where Seven Bridge Road and Harvard Road intersect. Lane's Crossing. Yeah, it was near a brickyard, and I believe he was in the brickyard business partly. And then South Lancaster Engine House, I'm not quite sure why that one got on. And then Founders Hall got on, and the AUC campus, and that's just sitting there empty right now. And then the Nathaniel Thayer Estate, which I mentioned before, is just sitting there with nothing happening. I was told once by someone that one of the ceilings has collapsed. I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't been in, but it's a shame. Okay, well, that's the end for all. Thank you for hanging in there for so long. Yes, and may the best things be preserved. That's what I hope.